Long ago, in days gone by, before the Yuletide King came down, before they called it Christmas morning, there were other creatures that would come. This story tells of an age when the nights were long and dark and cold. The snows came earlier and earlier each year, and each Christmas the trolls would come. For trolls too celebrate the midwinter feast, and they believe with their whole hearts, though they have none, that Yule must be cozy, with burning logs and living lights, drink as strong as they can get, and food, fat and filling. But the cavern halls beneath Leeffell Pike are dark and empty as the bellies of those who live inside. Cradled at the edge of the path between Leeffell Pike and Steely's-Fell, safe from the winds and snows that tear the land, where the westering slopes of those two mountains meet, lay Hemmingsthwaite, where there was always light and fire and food. The soil was rich and the people were good. One Yule night evening, long ago, when the hilly inlands were still mostly empty and untouched, a man came knocking at the door at Hemmingsthwaite, which was then called Shuthwaite. He explained that he came from far Finnmark, miles and miles away to the north, and was on his way southwards to Denmark. And he wondered if they might not guest him and his great white hound for the night. "We can receive you at our house," said the father, "but we cannot guest you, as we go to Caldacre for Yule, as we have for many years, ever since the trolls took to celebrating their Troll-Yule in our home. They dance and racket, curse and swear all Yule night long," said the mother, "and if there's not enough to eat or drink, there'll be no peace the rest of the year either." "I should have great fun to see them." "Oh, you will not come out alive." "If I may, I'd like to try my luck even so." "Well then, you can stay, and you shall have room," said the father. "Sleep in the outshot and stay out of sight. You may be all right, but do not touch the food at the great table." And so the hosts left, and the room filled with silence. The table was set for a big feast. Trolls are all eating and very hungry, but they still prefer the finer foods. So they gathered for them all the meals that they were going to eat throughout Yule. They daren't do otherwise. And when the man saw all that food, he felt at last the emptiness that weeks wandering in the winter wilderness had hollowed out in his belly. And just as quickly he forgot their warning and sat down to the greatest meal of his life. There was sour cream porridge topped with sugar and cinnamon, and a pat of butter that was already melting, forming a delicious warm buttery pool at the centre. There was live fish, fresh char, graved salmon with mustard sauce, and meats of all kinds. There were lamb ribs, salted, dried and soaked to perfection, unsmoked, which was strange but not unpleasant. There were medister cakes, medister sausage, smoked sausage, lingonberry jam, red cabbage and mashed swede, and flatbread soaked in broth with syrup. There were morning cold table foods like brawn, cured ham, roast beef and swine steak, and desserts like rice cream, cloudberry cream, caramel pudding, and 7 sorts of cookies, though there were plenty more than 7. Serena cookies, crumb cakes, juice cookies, sand cakes, goro cookies, syrup colours, pepper nuts, poor man's pastries, cake donuts, and crispy spiced gingerbread cookies. And to drink there was mulled wine and a full keg of dark, strong Christmas beer. When he had finally eaten his fill and loosened his breeches, he was feeling very sleepy. His hound had taken home under the stove and was snoring loudly. The pillows in the outshot were soft and clean. The dark deepened outside the windows. The night was silent and the air was clear. All signs pointed to to a quiet Christmas Eve. He wasn't sure whether he even believed in trolls. When the clock struck midnight, the door opened, and in came the night, and with it a grand old mountain troll with big red eyes and a wild beard of green shield and crottle. And after him they poured in with a rattle and rumble, trolls and thyrses, ents and ettins, until they filled the room like mushrooms in September. Some were big and round like boulders, and some thin and fragile like lichen twigs. Some were tall and straight as spruce trees, and some were crooked like tree-lined pines. Some faces were grey and hard and cold, with tin plate eyes, and some were dark and gnarly like the roots of fallen trees. And they were all decked out in gold and silver or costly silks and linens, embroidered with fine and complex patterns, in styles that none can now recall how to make. The old troll had such a long nose that it stretched 3 times round his belly, that was broad like 7 men stood side to side, and poked out from under his left armpit. That one was the greatest and most luxurious of them all, and must have been the mountain king himself. "Who? I smell the blood of Christian men," he said, and his eyes searched the room. "If I catch you, I eat you." But the man lay still and gave no sound. And when the trolls heard no Christian sounds, or saw any Christian people, they sat down to eat. The stench must be lingering from those that had lived there. The oldest troll took his seat at the head of the table and gathered his family all around. He had just one tooth that was long and sharp as an awl, and so hungry was he that he took his first bite straight out of the table, and all around the table they cheered and gorged down drink and shouted "Thrond, Thrond, Thrond," for that was his name. And then they all took to eating, and they laughed and drank through the night. From the darkness of his bed, the man was watching them. Only his eyes were visible. When the old troll had had his fill and was ready to lie back and enjoy the meal, one of the smaller trolls brought out a pine branch, which he lit in a bowl on the table. The branch crackled and gave off a thick black smoke, and the old troll took out what looked like a long hollowed out twig, and he put it to the smoke and drew breath. He held and blew, and the smoke formed a big smoke ring that floated over to the oven. Then one of the troll children saw the hound sleeping soundly under the oven. "The old man's forgotten his cat!" He cut off a bit of sausage and set it on a fork. That he cooked over a burning branch until it was glowing hot. He stuck it to the hound, who accepted the bite, but when he bit it off, a stream of searing hot fat spat out and hit her in the eye. "Hey, kitty kitty, want some sausage?" the troll screamed, and they all roared with laughter. She did want some sausage, and when a voice sounded from the outshot, "Seek heal," the hound tore into the troll's foot, who screamed out in pain. "Ow! Seems it did want more," said another. "Who was that voice?" "Seek all," the voice yelled again, and the hound sprang up and took to chasing the drowsy and bewildered trolls, who let fall from their hands the foods they held, and one over another they bolted to the door in terror, with yells and yammers, howls, growls and curses. "Christen folk, Christen folk," the old troll cried. "The Lamb of God is upon us." The door was small and the trolls were many, and they all wanted first out. Last to the door was the old troll father, and he was in such a hurry that he crushed his skull through the head of the door, which rent. And the door was now of size, and they all got out. The man gathered together his pickpack and a stick of mutton and followed after. Further and further away in the distance he could see the trolls running, and they ran all the way home to Leeffell Pike, with the hound at their heels and their tails between their legs. Christmas Eve 1 year later, the father of the house was in the forest, gathering wood for the weekend, expecting troll company again. This year, like all others. The past year had been full of tales about the man and his hound, who had come one night and vanished just as quickly as he came. Some said he came there to feast with the trolls, and some said that the trolls had eaten him, or that he was trolling for them under Leeffell Pike. Then he heard a call far away in the forest. "Hey!" "Aye," the father echoed. "Do you still have that grim cat?" the voice called. The father gave his head a good scratch before he answered. "Aye, aye. She sleeps there soundly by the oven as we speak," he said. "And she's born 7 kitlings that are 7 times fat and 7 times fierce as herself." The wind sighed through the trees. "Then we can never more drink Yule at your house." And since that time, they have not. That was a migratory legend of type ML6015, commonly known as the Christmas Visitors, but it has also been categorized as a fairy tale and has been given the type AT1161, the cat on Dovrefjell. I've put this version of the story together from 49 different variants, along with a couple elements of my own. The central version that I've used is one from Mulldale in Telsmark, and all the place names are translations of real place names there. This story happened a long time ago, and the age that it's set in is meant to be the Little Ice Age, and more specifically the falling mean temperatures of the latter half of the 16th century. The last known mention of Shuthwaite is from a 1596 document in which a man sold all his lands in Seatland, on the ridge and on Shuthwaite Hill, before the name faded into legend and only the dim ancestral memories of the old recall what really happened. There is a further story of what happened, because a few states eastwards, in the dale above Shuthwaite, up in the pass between Steelysfell and Leeffell Pike, lay the horse marshes, and legend says that trolls dug great trenches and gathered every spring and stream that fed into it, turning it into a dam. And when the dam was full, they broke it, and all the gathered water poured out over the hillside and bore with it house and field, leaving the soil barren and all the houses as wreckage in the river Mull. As time went by, the hill was reclaimed by the forest, until another family built Hemmingsthwaite in the same place. And that farm still lies there today.